Hello, everybody. Hello, hello, hello. We're on YouTube and Instagram. I hope all is well with everybody. Hello. We're going to be talking about true empathy today. Welcome in, welcome in. Let me know where you're watching from. And I'm super excited to kind of talk through this topic. It's not a topic that you hear often or hear talked about often. So I'm not in this way anyway. You'll understand it a little bit. But I hope that this is helpful today and that you guys walk away from this live with something. Walking away with something that you can take and put into action. Walking away with something that you can even just think about a little bit more or get more clearer on how you want to show empathy or even receive empathy. So, yeah, I hope this is helpful. If this is your first time, my name is Debbie. I am a certified mindfulness coach. I have been doing this for almost 4 years now, or actually, is it 4 years? Yeah, no, it actually is closer to 5 years. Listen, that time go by fast. Okay, I started during the pandemic, so yeah, closer to 5 years. Um, but yeah, so what we do on this channel is all things mindfulness. The voice you hear on the meditations is my voice, but we also get together every week and talk through different mental health topics that we vote on. Thank you to everybody that's voted, and you guys are voting every week, so I really do appreciate you guys giving me feedback and voting. True empathy was by far the top requested. And then right under that is survival mode recovery. So I'll do that next week because there was a lot of votes for that one too. Hey, Hiru, welcome in, welcome in. Thank you so much for joining. I appreciate you coming in every week. I truly do. So we can go ahead and get started. If you haven't already, make sure to like the live. That helps me show up in people's feeds. And also just share it with anybody that you think can benefit from this live. And yeah, and if you're not common like Hiru is here from what, the UK, right? So thank you anyone that's coming in, and it's your first time or you haven't, like, let me know where you're watching from. I really do appreciate you coming in and watching. And then we can dive into the topic here as soon as I get everything up here. Okay. All right, so true empathy. There was a few ways that I wanted to approach having this conversation about empathy. Gratitude and appreciation. Oh, of course. No, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you. When it comes to talking about true empathy, I think we always more so talk about, like, what is empathy, the difference between empathy and sympathy. I didn't really want to go that route. I wanted to make this more of a practical thing, and how we can actually apply that to our lives. So I broke this down into how do we exercise true empathy when working with others, but also how do we receive empathy? Because I think that's crucial and important. And that's kind of like veering off into being vulnerable, or how to be vulnerable, or how to allow yourself to be in that space. But I think it's important because I think there's a misconception of what empathy really is. I think we think empathy is just, oh, like, I can try to understand someone's feelings, and it's a lot more than that. So I want to dive into what true empathy is, how do you exercise it when it comes to other people, how you receive that empathy, and then there's affirmations for both as well. So I have 4 affirmations for how you are able to show and express empathy, and then also how you can receive empathy. So I hope this is helpful. I hope this is a blessing. I hope that it shares some insight to empathy in general. Hello, Rodrigo. Welcome in. Welcome in. Thank you for joining. Make sure to let me know where you're watching from. Um, Awesome. All right. So true empathy. Let's start with what is true empathy. So the definition, I got the general definition, but I've kind of added my stuff to it. So it's deeply connecting with someone's emotions, perspectives, and experiences without judgment, without changing them or trying to change them, and on their level. I think all of that is very important. Deeply connecting with someone's emotions, perspectives, experiences without judgment, without trying to change them, and on their level, right? So I know we all know the saying of treating others how you want to be treated, right? And I get the premise of it. And when teaching kids, I get that. But there is a certain extent that we have to kind of graduate from that. And it's more so of treating people how they need to be treated is important, because even we're thinking about love languages and all of these things, the way that people want to receive support may look different from person to person. So we can't necessarily give a cookie cutter response when it comes to providing support to other people, especially for very close and intimate relationships. So whether that be with our children or with our spouse or with our siblings or with our parents, those very core intimate relationships may have to look slightly different. And there's a sacrificial piece of love or showing love to someone, right? And with that sacrifice, it may be I have to meet this person where they are right now, versus me just showing my empathy and love and compassion the way that I think that they should receive it. So that's what true empathy is. It's outside of just the cookie cutter, I want to empathize with someone, or I'm an empath and I want to show that to the person that I care about. It's taking it a step further and having a deeper understanding of how that person wants to receive support, how that person thrive, what type of support that person thrives in, versus giving them what I think that they should have, or the type of support that I think that they should have. Hello, Copycat. Welcome in. Thank you so much for joining. Definitely, if you're watching, let me know where you're watching from. I appreciate you. So just keeping that in mind, and I'll give an example. It's kind of like when you get that question from your manager. I've gotten this question from managers. Maybe some managers don't ask this question, or it's basically, how do you want to receive recognition, right? Some people don't want to get blasted out in front of, everyone and say, oh, well, such and such did a great job. That may embarrass them. But to me, I like that. Like, hey, give me my kudos in front of everybody. I appreciate it, right? Not everybody wants to receive it in that way. And that may make it more difficult for them to take that support in, versus if you send them a kind message on the side, like, hey, I see you. I see that you did this. I see that you did that. Like, I appreciate it. And just have that intimate, personal messaging. So everybody receives that differently when it comes to recognition. The same thing with empathy. The same thing with getting support, right? Everybody's going to receive that or look at it differently. And not saying that you have to necessarily, everybody in your life, you need to understand how they receive empathy. I'm not saying that. More so those more deeper, intimate relationships that you have and connections, those relationships that you want to cultivate and build and give support to. These are even friendships too. Your close friends, your best friends, those relationships that you're looking to sustain. There's a difference between an acquaintance and someone that is your best friend. So really thinking about how you want to determine who your close, intimate relationships are. Because again, we're human, can't do this for everybody. But I think it's important for those close relationships. So keep that in mind. But the definition, I'll say it one more time: deeply connecting with someone's emotions, perspectives, and experiences without judgment, without trying to change them, and or directly on their level. Meeting people where they are, right? treating people how they need to be treated while remaining who you are in the process, which is important. Because once you meet people where they are, treating people how they need to be or want to be treated while remaining who you are in the process is important, because once you surpass who you are and surpass your own boundaries and limitations, good evening, welcome in. Once you do that, that turns into people pleasing. That could turn into manipulation. That could turn into a lot of different things. So treating people how they need to be treated while remaining who you are in the process is important. And make sure I'm not missing any other notes. I'm meeting people where they are, meeting others where they are, and not where I expect them to be, or not where I think they should be. Because it's another thing too. That's where the judgment comes into play, where we want to meet people where they are in efforts to change them versus in efforts to just support them or provide them support. So I hope this is helpful. I hope this is a very thorough, in-depth definition of what empathy or true empathy really is. If you have any other thoughts about true empathy or what do you think it is, definitely let me know in the comments. I'm more than happy to hearing your thoughts too. But that's the definition I came up with for based off of an overview from Webster, but then also too just within my own knowledge of mindfulness and thinking through relationships. Okay. So perfect. Went through the definition. So there's going to be, again, an overview of how do we exercise true empathy and how do we spot a performative empath. Okay. So we'll get there. We'll get there. So how do you exercise or show true empathy? While still having boundaries, because boundaries, again, like I said, is important. You can show empathy while still having boundaries. Those two things can coexist. It's just a matter of understanding the best way to show it, but then also keeping in mind who you are and what your limitations are. So how do you show true empathy? Starts with active listening. Active listening. Now, listening is, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but I'm not registering what you're saying, right? Or I don't care, or I need to get out what I need to get out before I can hear what you're saying. Active listening is actually really sitting and being intentional and being present in the conversation and listening to what their needs are and what they need from you, if it's something that's directed at you, or if it's just if they need support. Really taking the time to actively listen to the other person in order to seek understanding versus to seek a response, right? Hey, CJ, welcome in. Thank you so much for joining. So I think a lot of times when we're listening in conversations, we're either listening to have a response, a rebuttal, a way to be defensive, or we're listening to provide a solution, right? And both of those ways can be damaging in a conversation when it comes to empathy. And this is why I say this. Of course, listening to respond can be damaging, but listening to only find a solution can also be damaging. Only because sometimes people just need a listening ear. They don't want you to have to necessarily give them advice, or they don't necessarily need for you to fix their problem. They just need for someone's ear to be open and for someone's ear to be a soft place to land, right? So active listening is being able to really gauge that and say, hey, I don't even think that this person really needs me to give them support or give them a way of fixing the problem. It sounds like they're even working through the problem as they're talking through this. They just need me to hear them, right? So that's the biggest part of active listening you want to take into consideration. Now, granted, this is wide range. This is like on a case by case basis. There are some people that talk just to talk and they're not necessarily there to actually solve the problem. They just need to vent and they want to get it out and they want to gossip or they want to talk about people. That's different. Sometimes you got to cut them people off. Like, listen, okay, we done heard this. We done talked about this person over and over again. You done told me the same story 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times. Like, if there isn't any like resolution, then I don't know what support you want me to give you. But just keeping all of that in mind is important when it comes to active listening. In addition to actively listening, seeking to understand, right? Making sure that you're having the conversation to understand the other person versus giving them a response, giving them a rebuttal, or giving them judgments, or giving them a solution. All of that may not necessarily be necessary for the conversation. Emotional validation. If you have a conversation with someone and you can tell it's hard for them to tell you how they're feeling, the way to show true empathy is to also acknowledge that, right? And say, you know what, I know this is a tough situation, but I can also tell that was hard for you to tell me. Like, I really do appreciate you telling me that. And I'm so sorry that this is like, the situation or whatever, however you want to word it. But acknowledging and validating someone's emotions is important, especially when it comes to difficult conversations. So like if you're in a difficult conversation or an argument with someone, and even if they say, oh, you made me feel this way, that may not have been in your intention to make them feel that way. And even you saying that could be, helpful, but being an initial conversation of validating their emotions in it, like, oh, you know what? I do apologize for making you feel such and such and such and such. That wasn't my intention, but I can see that hurt you and I apologize or whatever. A lot of times we get dismissive in those conversations with well, that's not what I meant, and go off and get more defensive and yada, yada, yada. Just validate that person's emotions and say, hey, even if you're like, all right, bro, like you laid it on thick, right? That may be what's happening in your mind. But still, if you're looking to find a way to resolve, validating someone's emotions can go a far way. Let me make sure I'm not missing anything. Active listening, seeking understanding, emotional validation, holding space for vulnerability. I think that kind of goes back to the conversation of sometimes people don't want our advice, or they don't necessarily want us to try to fix the problem. They just need space to be vulnerable. So keeping that in mind, engaging that in the conversation, right? Providing solutions and resources when prompted, right? There's some people that are in my life that I may say like, okay, so are you telling me this because you want me to help? Or are you telling me this because you just want someone to talk about? Let the person tell you like, hey, like, I need advice on this. Like, what are your thoughts? If they're not asking for advice, if they're not asking for you to fix it, don't turn into Mr. and Mrs. Fix It and try to fix it on your own without them even acknowledging or saying that they need help, right? Because I think sometimes, especially those who maybe be struggling with people pleasing, we go into fix it mode. And we just go like, okay, well, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Like, then I can do this, and then you do this, and you do that. They ain't asked for that. And sometimes that can end up being or feeling to the other person as being overbearing, as being a know-it-all. They can even see it as being judgmental because now you're judging me and trying to fix it versus just helping me in the way that I need to be helped. So keeping that in mind, a lot of times people will tell you like, hey, what is your advice on this? I need your advice. I need your help. I'm trying to figure out a solution. Can you help me figure out a solution? Let them tell you that versus us turning into people pleasers and trying to go in and just try to fix everything. One, that helps within your own limitations and boundaries, right? Because we can't fix everybody. We can't help everybody. We can't be superhumans. And allowing people to let you know if they need help also gives you the space to be like to be able to say, which is my next bullet point. It gives you the space to be able to say and be honest and say, hey, like at this time, like I don't have the capacity to do what you need me to do. I don't have the capacity to provide the support that you need, but there's this, or there's this resource, or you can maybe do this. It gives you that, I don't like to say out, but it gives you that flexibility to be honest about your boundaries and limitations. I think we end up falling into these different situations where we are exhausted and burnt out with our family members and friends, and friendships and things of that matter, because we assume that our friends or family members need help and we just go into helping versus allowing them to ask, right? Because then they're going to start assuming that you're going to help them for everything, because then you have those people who are bloodsuckers that just kind of take and don't reciprocate that take that and give. And when you go through the process and living life of assuming that someone else needs your help and you just go in and just help, it puts you in a situation of, again, people pleasing, burnout, frustration, you trying to manage your own life and the things that you have going on. This gives more flexibility while also showing true empathy to someone, right? I think we think of true empathy as just jumping in and helping, and that's not necessarily the case. It's giving people what they need, where they need it, and meeting them where they are. And sometimes that empathy is to tell those people the truth and honesty in all aspects, whether it be your boundaries, your limitations, whether it be if they are asking for that advice, giving them honest advice, not sugarcoating advice, just being sure to give them what they need. And sometimes what they need is honesty. Like, all right, bro. Like, I get it. They did this, this to you, they did this to you, but why do you keep going back, right? Those honest conversations is what true empathy is. That's what true love is, right? With love comes correction. With love comes that true honesty. And with love, it sometimes is giving someone a wake-up call. So keeping that in mind, that's all still under empathy, right? Now, people may have difficulty with communicating that, and I can get that. And that could even be a part of your honesty, like, hey, like, I'm not great at communicating this stuff, but this is what I think, if they're asking you for your support or for your advice. So keeping that all in mind, y'all. I know that was a mouthful, but I hope this was helpful in regards to thinking about empathy and how to express it and how to show it. So that was it for how to exercise true empathy: active listening, seeking understanding, emotional validation, holding space for vulnerability, providing solutions and resources when prompted, and then practicing honesty. Okay, so on the other side, right? How do we spot performative empaths? Those people that are pretending to care, right? Like, that is a thing. Whether it be people at work or whether it be family members or someone that you're dating, whatever. There is when people say that they're an empath, to me, that's performative. To me, so I'm maybe a little bit more of a stickler for that, because if you have to say that you're an empath, that tells me that that's maybe what you want to be, but not necessarily what you are. Some people may say it in conversation, but someone that says it a lot, like over and over and over again, is a little bit performative. But yeah, so how do we spot a performative empath? Someone pretending to care. Their actions don't align with the compassion they have expressed, right? The proof is in the pudding, okay? It's based off of your actions. If your actions show that you are not empathetic to whatever situation that you are in, that they have aligned themselves to you on, then they're most likely performative. If they're not listening or have a shallow understanding, if they're not hearing you, right? if they are listening to respond, if they're listening to just get their point across, if they are talking over you or things of that matter, more performative. They may say that they are empathetic and they understand, or it's a lot of I understand, but, or I understand, but, I understand, but. That could be more performative of them just saying like, hey, yeah, I get it, but this is what I think. They're not hearing you, right? Um, not listening. Oh yeah, not listening or having a shallow understanding takes their understanding, because if they do get a point to where they understand, taking that understanding to manipulate a person, you, or a situation. So sometimes people will take your vulnerability and throw it back in your face. Sometimes people will take your vulnerability to something that you shared with them in confidence, and it came back, whether it be back to you or came back in a way to where you're in conversation with them or maybe in an argument with them and it comes up, right? And it may not even have anything to do with what you're arguing or talking about. That's how someone will manipulate your vulnerability. When their responses are more judgmental, they're projecting on you, there's a lot of avoidance or super defensive, that may be a performative empath. They're empathetic up until a certain point, and then after that, everything just kind of changes. Now, granted, this is all very general, right? This can be applied to any situation, but there are some nuances, right? So it could be, if we didn't do the best that we could have done in a particular relationship, and then they kind of cut off, or they were empathetic at a certain point, but because something happened, they had to withdraw. There's so many different things that can happen. So you want to keep that in mind in thinking about different situations and people. But if it's a situation where they have presented themselves to be empathetic to your situation, and then it just kind of twists and turns, or they manipulate you in a certain way by using that situation, or they're not really looking to provide any action or support when you need support. Now, it's one thing if they say, or they communicate and say, you know what, I can't provide the support. But a lot of times the avoidance or the defensiveness or the projection is that it's something that they don't want to deal with, and they just can't tell you or say it to you. So, and all of these situations aren't cookie cutter. It doesn't mean that you got to cut that person off tomorrow. It just means that you want to be intentional with the relationships and then where you are holding space for yourself with the type of people that you are communicating with. And keep these things in mind when interacting with people, right? Especially if vulnerability is difficult for you, which is probably difficult for most of us. We're all humans, and we've all had our own traumas and triggers and experiences that we struggle with. And sometimes vulnerability is difficult. So just being intentional with who you are vulnerable with is important also. If you know that this is a friend that you have, but you know that they just be on something, then that's a certain level of friendship, right? And I think sometimes we make the mistake of being vulnerable with the wrong people, right? So just keep that in mind, y'all. I hope this was helpful. How do we spot a performative empath? Their actions don't align with the compassion that they have expressed. Not listening or having a shallow understanding takes their understanding to manipulate a person or situation. And responses are in projection, avoidance, or defensiveness. Okay? So I hope this is helpful, y'all. We're going to go into affirmations. Let me know in the comments if this was helpful for you. I really do appreciate it. And as you guys do that, I'm going to go ahead and pull up the affirmations. We have 8 affirmations tonight. Yeah. Okay, so we have 8 affirmations tonight. 4 for providing empathy and 4 for receiving empathy. Okay, so feel free to use these affirmations however you wish to. Feel free to write them down. If you want to write them down in your journal, perfectly okay. If you want to do sticky notes, do that. If you want to write down, any of them, or actually do any vocal notes for affirmations, feel free to use that. If it doesn't resonate with you, then don't write it down. Perfectly okay. If you need to change the language, then change the language. This is just a framework here. The word has become very popular in the spiritual community. Yeah, it's very popular, and it's kind of desensitized now when people say that they want to express empathy, especially in the workplace. Because listen, I know y'all care about me. Yeah, like y'all can show empathy, and they may care for to a certain extent, but thinking through it, like with coworkers, it's like, yes, there you may pull some great friends here and there out of coworkers, but most of the time it goes up into a certain extent. So like, I know and understand I can only be so vulnerable with coworkers. Now outside, like after work, if I don't work there no more or whatever, that's different. But I'm starting to learn that I can only go but so far. So you just want to make sure that you take the time to gauge of who you can be vulnerable with, and then also too in showing empathy and your limitations to those in the workplace or whatever. But yeah, number one. Let me make sure I have here. Okay, so these 4 affirmations are for providing empathy. Number one, I see the humanity in everyone I meet. I see the humanity in everyone that I meet. I see the humanity in everyone I meet. So this is just a reminder that we're all human. We all have our own things going on. And even in spaces where it may be a stranger or someone that you don't know, it's still a human being. It's still someone with a heart, someone with a soul. And you don't know what people are going through. It's just a matter of giving people grace, especially when I'm just out and about. Somebody bump into me and they don't say, I'm sorry. Okay, listen, we're all human. They may have got a lot of things going on right now. So this is just a reminder that we're all human, and we all make mistakes. We all have our own frustrations. We all have our life's woes and issues, and giving people grace in that. So I see the humanity in everyone I meet. Number 2, I create space for others to be heard and understood. I create space for others to be heard and understood. I create space for others to be heard and understood. So just making sure that we create space for others to be heard and understood, but that comes with a boundary, right? Like if you are not in a space to receive someone else's trauma or frustrations or issues that they're going through, voice that, communicate that, set the boundary. Like, hey, like I understand you're going through a lot. Like I also am going through it right now, a lot right now. I'm probably not the best place to land right now. If you want to go as far as giving like more resources or who else they can talk to or suggesting something else, then do that. But yes, you want to create space, but you want to create space when you have a full cup, You don't want to create that space when you have an empty cup, because that could take you just over the top, right? So setting your boundaries in that, but trying your best to, when you have a full cup and when you're in a space where you can receive what someone's going through and show them empathy, creating a space to where they can be heard and understood, like I was saying before, versus judgments, versus you trying to give them answers and advice when they don't need it, and support in the way that they need it. Okay, so I create space for others to be heard and understood. Number 3, I choose compassion over judgment and extend grace. I choose compassion over judgment and extend grace. I choose compassion over judgment and extend grace. Goes back to jumping right to those judgments, right? You may be thinking them. We're human. We may be thinking about the judgments like she ain't never gonna leave this man, or he ain't never gonna do right by. You know what I mean? Like there's always gonna be those underlining judgments, right? But starting with compassion, we don't always have to jump into judgments. You may give advice and say, hey, like, I think you may have handled this the wrong way or whatever. But choosing compassion over the judgments and extending grace before, if you are going to go into advice or providing support or being honest, doing that first, right? And then number 4, I honor the unspoken emotions of others that words cannot express. I honor the unspoken emotions of others that words cannot express. I'll say that one more time. I honor the unspoken emotions of others that words cannot express. That's the part of empathy I think a lot of people miss, is when you have those social cues, right? Those nonverbal moments where you can tell someone is frustrated or angry, or you can tell that someone's sad. If you see someone's crying or whatever. A lot of times, because it's uncomfortable, we just ignore it, right? But there is a space for you to honor those unspoken emotions and ask someone if they're okay. There's nothing wrong with that. I've done that, and I've done that to strangers. Like, I'm just out and about, and then there's someone crying, and they're like, "Are you okay? Like, is everything?" And it may be something that's unspoken, and maybe something that's there that you obviously see that something's wrong or something's off or something's not right, but we ignore it. So, like, just being really cognizant of that and honoring the unspoken emotions is another way to show or provide empathy to someone, especially for someone that you live with or someone that's in your space. Even with my kids, like, my daughter came in the other day, and I'm asking her, I'm saying, hey, like, is everything okay? How did school go? How did this go? How did whatever go? And she's like, it's okay. And I'm like, are you okay? Like, it's like there's something off about you today. And she's like, oh yeah, I'm just tired. And I'm like, oh, okay. I was like, well, you need to get some rest. So just like those little nuances that you can pick up on. It's like if somebody's saying they're okay, and you can be like, okay, no, you're not. Okay, you're not okay. All right, let's talk about it if you want to, right? So just thinking about all of those nonverbal cues that you may pick up on is another way to express empathy in a way that people may not, or people that will actually really appreciate. Okay, so now we're on receiving empathy. So we have 4 for receiving empathy. Those were providing empathy. I see the humanity in everyone I meet. I create space for others to be heard and understood. I choose compassion over judgment and extend grace. And then I honor the unspoken emotions of others that words cannot express. Now, receiving empathy. I trust my intuition to recognize genuine and false empathy. I trust my intuition to recognize genuine and false empathy. I trust my intuition to recognize genuine and false empathy. This may be easier said than done, but like I said, with the cues that I talked about earlier, it's like you want to be careful and be intentional with those who are more, or who are genuine or genuinely empathetic, to those who are performative. Okay. I know we talk about a lot the word, or we talked about empathy is a popular word, but vulnerability is also a popular word when it comes into the mental health space. And we say it as if like you want to be vulnerable with everybody, and that's not necessarily the case. Like, you can use wisdom, right? And who you're vulnerable with, and that level of vulnerability, right? Because the more that you share, and especially based off of what it is, right? If you're in a relationship with someone and there's very crucial pieces and things that you need to share with with that person, then you need to do that. But there is, as you're going through the process of whether building friendships, or even with family, or if there is, a romantic relationship, you want to be intentional, and you want to know and understand your limitations, but also knowing and understanding the limitations of others. Like, if you are in relationship with someone, friendship, family, whatever, and you're like, I'm not going to share this with them because I know they're not going to be able to receive it in a way that I probably would want them to receive it. That's using wisdom. That's not necessarily trauma based. That's just using wisdom and operating wisdom. Like, okay, I'm not going to tell them this because this is something that they're probably, it's not, I know who this person is and I'm going to meet this person where they are. And I know sharing this will probably be too much for them. Right. So just keeping that in mind and using your intuition to recognize those genuine spaces and those false spaces. Number 2 is I set healthy boundaries with those who drain my energy. Listen, great follow up, Debbie. I set healthy boundaries with those who drain my energy. If anytime that you go around that person and you are drained after talking to them, like just exhausted, it's just too much. Understanding that may be a person that you have to set a boundary with. Not saying that you have to remove them from your life. Not saying that they, you have to cut them off completely. Not saying that, but there may be some boundaries that you want to set with them or set internally as far as limitations. Like I was saying before, that this may not land well with this particular person. Keeping that in mind to protect your energy, to protect your peace. And if you know that someone is super or hyper judgmental in a certain way, being vulnerable with them in that space isn't the wisest, right? So keeping that in mind when thinking about setting boundaries with people who especially are draining and drain your energy. There are some people that you may have in your life that create anxiety every time that you're with them. They may just some people just dump a lot of stuff on you every time you meet with them. And even though you may want to empathize with them, you may have to limit those interactions because of how draining it is. There are some people in our lives that always got something bad happening to them. Always. It's always, every time you talk to them, it's like, listen to what happened today. And da-da-da-da-da-da. Like, those people may be more difficult to show empathy to, but there may be some boundaries that you need there. Like I said, limiting your interactions, limiting the amount of times of connecting with them when there's other people around versus one-on-one. There's so many ways that you can set boundaries, but keeping that in mind when thinking about people who drain your energy. That may be a good journaling question if you feel burned out often. Like, what's burning you out, but also who's burning you out? Who's draining your energy? Who is sucking all of the energy out of you every time you talk to them? Keep that in mind. Number 3, I give my energy to those who reciprocate with authenticity and love. I give my energy to those who reciprocate with authenticity and love. I give my energy to those who reciprocate with authenticity and love. So understanding that you have to, when thinking about those who drain your energy, giving energy to those who are peaceful places to land is important. Those who also reciprocate, those who actually give it back to you, those that where it's a two-way relationship versus a one-way relationship, right? There are some people, like in my past, whether it be, I would say probably more friendships that I can think of, that my empathy was one way, but it did not come back the other way, right? And I would empathize with these people. I would reach out to these people, check in on them or whatever, just say, hey, like, I know that you were going through this. How are you doing? How's everything going? Are you doing better? But if there was something happening on my side, you wouldn't hear from them, right? So just thinking about pouring your energy, if you are going to pour in your energy into other people, pouring it into people that reciprocate. Now, granted, there's going to be times where you're going to give to people and it's not going to come back. That's not a bad thing. That, of course, with strangers, like I said, I saw someone crying. I asked them how they're doing. I don't know that person. I ain't going to ever see them again. So they're not going to necessarily reciprocate, but I see how beneficial it was in that moment. So just keeping that in mind, this is more so for close, intimate relationships. And then lastly, this is the last one. I use wisdom in who I am vulnerable with, protecting my peace while staying open. I use wisdom in who I am vulnerable with, protecting my peace while also staying open. One last time, I use wisdom in who I am vulnerable with, protecting my peace while staying open. The more that you are intentional about how you are being vulnerable with others, the easier it will be for you to be vulnerable, especially for those who struggle with it, right? It's hard for you to be open. It's hard for you to express your emotions to other people. You find it difficult to receive support. You find it difficult to ask for help. Those are all cues of someone that may have difficulty with being vulnerable because they may have been vulnerable just with the wrong people, right? So, keeping that in mind, using that wisdom and who you're going to be vulnerable with will protect your heart. It will protect you from being in situations of vulnerability with people that don't deserve that level of vulnerability, right? Everyone deserves that human side of you, that humanistic piece of you, right? But that level of deep vulnerability should be reserved for those very intimate relationships, and that's really it, y'all. Like, there's definitely some levels of vulnerability that you can have with people to help people, right? That sacrificial piece of it. But it's important to use that with wisdom, to be intentional, to do that with care, and to do that with a level of protection of your heart, your mind, and your spirit. Okay, so I hope this was helpful. Those 4 affirmations for receiving empathy is: I trust my intuition to recognize genuine and false empathy. I set healthy boundaries with those who drain my energy. I give my energy to those who reciprocate and with authenticity and love. And I use wisdom in who I am vulnerable with, protecting my peace while staying open. Y'all, this was a goodie. I liked this one. I hope this was helpful. Feel free to let me know in the comments if there's anything that I may have missed when it comes to empathy, any questions that you might have about it. I'll be more than happy to answer those questions and get back to you. Next week, we'll most likely do the second most popular poll, because there was a lot of votes for survivor mode recovery. So we'll do that next week. So there won't be a poll on Saturday. But we'll do that for next week to start off the top of March, right? This year is moving. So look out for that live. And if you haven't already, make sure to sign up for the newsletter so that way you can get all of the updates for the lives and any additional mindfulness tips. And yeah, y'all, it was great talking with y'all. It's, of course, every Monday at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. Please join me every week. Of course, Hiru, thank you. You're very welcome. And y'all have a great rest of the day. I'll talk to y'all soon. Bye.